It's not the first time. Europe was in Africa before. Europe was developed Africa just like they was developed Asia.
Developed what Africa? Come on, man. What Africa?
Could you just let me explain, please? You see, back in the days, right? You see, what the problem Africa has is greedy. Okay? You see, when it gets to black and black, people are more greedier than ever. That's a major issue with Africa. Like Nigeria, where I'm from, right? Back in 70s, early 70s to late 80s, Nigeria was developed with Europeans, German factory. They brought all those things to Africa. But our leaders back then, they cannot maintain those things. They cannot keep it up. Matter of fact, what they was developed, we are going the same rate as China at that time. Then Nigeria fell off the cliff completely. Because if you still go there, you still see all the mark of all those modernization, how they brought it back then in 70s. But due to the coups and others, right? But greedies, lack way convince them not to focus on the right thing and do the wrong things. So if even your country in Angola, go and look at the history, you will be surprised. You will be shocked how much Europe have invested in those African countries to move forward. Why are you laughing about it?
Angola was industrial because of Soviet Union. You know, the only industry we had was because of Soviet Union. I saw the Soviet Union collapse, Angola, boom.
I think what Yure's point is you know, it's manufacturing and figuring out those processes that really matter. And Germany's figured it out, and South Korea's figured it out, Japan has figured it out. Absolutely, he's 100% right. But with that said, if you don't figure it out, it really helps to have a lot of resources cheap. And that's where the laggards come in. That's where France and the UK and Spain come in, because they could never figure out production the way the Germans could. So the only way France competes, to Vaz's point, is all that cheap resources coming in from Africa, which helps prop up their economy. Not just the resources coming in, but all the jobs that they support. Right, both in France and around the globe. But I think that's a point that Yure's trying to make, is that you know, it's the manufacturing that matters, which I agree. But you know, certainly doesn't hurt having cheap resources and labor.
Yeah,
and market.
I agree with you. You know, but you know, all these countries, all these European countries that had the colony in Africa, they wish they had the French system. Trust me, the French system is fucking good for France. Basically, France gets everything for free. You know, they pay
not really.
They pay ATP for uranium. ATP for uranium. How much is that the price?
Okay, do they enjoy such cheap electricity that they get from uranium?
Oh.
Is the cheap price of electricity in France because they get almost free uranium? Do they enjoy it like that?
Yes.
You're saying a benefit of having such a cheap uranium?
France,
is it cheap
euro. France has too much. France has too much electricity. You know what they do? They sell that electricity to UK.
Like, I'm no nuclear engineer, but I'm guessing once you get the plant,
people.
So I can bring a recent announcement. I can bring a recent announcement regarding uranium prices. So France paid 80 cents to the pound or the kilo, or what, I think it was the kilo, to Niger, and this is a well below market prices. It's higher grade quality of the uranium, and it's well below what, for example, Kazakhstan and other equivalent countries sell it for. And so one of the responses that have been made very recently here from the transitional government here in Niger is that the price is going to be around, I think it was like drastically higher, $100 a kilo or something. Now, whether you're going to get to that point is kind of irrelevant. What is clearly signaled here is that this spot price that is fairly unique for France to be acquiring is no longer going to be the case. That is, when it comes to commodities and prices and manufacturing, and like also to the point, Nunia, it's not entirely accurate that France wasn't exactly able to catch up with Germany completely in that sense. There were several reasons for that, but because France is still a very industrialized country, all things considered, but they have suffered just like the United States and Britain in particular. This is the thing I referred to earlier, where they were artificially forced to have their currency high. This hurt their own export industry and forced them to gradually debase their industry and move it abroad through the corporation and hyper-financialize it, which is also the case for France, which has a lot of boosts from these artificially lower commodity prices they acquire from Africa. But one thing that should be noted, because Vosh said that within 12 months it's going to be over. Well, that might be true, but it's actually more likely to take more time for the simple reason that France has also acquired a relative monopoly on the market there. That is to say, they are one of the primary buyers, the primary consumers to quite a lot of the cheap goods that they get. And yes, they may have to pay a little bit more in market price, but they are already well established. They don't have to develop their industries to accommodate that. So what they will have is a strong dip in their economy. How strong is hard to tell, but it won't be like they crash or something like that. They're already so well established that you won't see what you will see is something like what you pointed out with the UK, because that is, and Wyatt pointed out too, and I have seen that myself, having lived there, and then followed the intensity case of the times, and it was quite shocking how quickly things were deteriorating. And so you would see something like that, I would expect. But that's
I just want to comment on Coping's comment. He's absolutely right. At this point, and I was about to say the same thing, at this point all of their costs are fixed for the most part. It's just maintaining their nuclear power plants. Uranium is a variable component that comes in to helps with whatever the hell it is they're doing to make this thing work. I'm assuming that variable component is very small in comparison to the overall cost of the plant, right? However, to your point, it's going to hurt because, they're used to, what your numbers are saying is true, if they're used to paying 80% and now it's $200, they're going to have to absorb that cost. That's where the taxpayers will have to pay it. Now, but in the overall cost structure, shouldn't really matter too much. And it should, in theory, bring the overall global uranium price down because all that new uranium's coming onto the market.
The thing we also need to take into account is that
but what you're saying is about the price
being built around the world. That it is impossible that the French will have to come into this competition system. The Russians are building a lot of new nuclear stations all over the world. Huge one in Turkey, in India, in Egypt, and so on. So it's like the market has to happen. It would have been good for France to have some countries where they could do better business. As you say, Nuna, actually the price of uranium, it's a very small part in the whole process of producing nuclear energy. There's much more expensive things in that industry than just the uranium, but the fuel for itself. But nevertheless, the thing is that the market is complexifying, and the French will just have to come to the open market, and prices will go up. But one of the things Coping was saying very well, there are just two countries that can really run Germany, but they don't know what to do with the with the plant in Germany. There are almost just three countries in the world that can really refine uranium in big quantities to supply to several. And these ones are Russia, main and foremost, France, and the United States, with very low quality, the United States, unfortunately. But this is a problem. So France is not going to be out of business. No way.
No, they will. Because they're not gonna pay the money they ask.
Do French enjoy cheap electricity?
Prata. We only talking about.
Okay.
We only talking about Niger.
French.
We only talking about the uranium they get from Niger. Trust me, France gets that shit from a lot of other countries.
French.
The point that Prata made, that I also try to make, when I refer to having a monopoly,
Wyatt pointed to.
Wait, Jure, please wait. So when I refer to the monopoly, that's exactly what Prata pointed out there, because it takes time building up the infrastructure required to actually consume, for example, uranium. That one by itself. You can say there's more things to it than gold and whatnot, but who then is it that has the highest requirement? Well, you will find most of that in the tech industry and the artisanal industry that is already established in these countries, right? And so for that reason, like, okay, fine, now you can perhaps dictate better terms. You can get to market prices, maybe. That's what you can perhaps expect, because you cannot actually just sell it to someone else. There are going to be a bunch of other nations jumping over. You mentioned Russia, for example. Prata mentioned Russia. Belarus also produces its own uranium, and it is able to acquire it from Kazakhstan. By logistic reasons alone, that's going to be more than enough. So by default, they're here. The Sahel countries, they are still linked in the economic system that predate the current times. It's actually from the colonial era, where they were structured to be dependent on the host nation by having like a very singular economies that were made them very easily dependent. And so for this reason, even if they are now able to dictate better terms, yes, it's of course better, no doubt about that. But it's not going to be like, boom, no, fuck it, we're taking $100 a kilo. It's likely going to be more closer to the regular market prices, because I think 100 was well over the regular prices. It was more like a signaling. That was what it was. And so France is likely going to...
By the way, Niger asking for 250.
French people don't enjoy the prices that those low uranium prices should provide them. Right, but Wyatt pointed out is that elites enjoy benefits of those cheap uraniums, not people. People in France or businesses don't enjoy the cheap prices. That cheap uranium should enable them cheap electricity. Right? It's basically straight prices of electricity throughout the EU close to each other. So the French don't enjoy anything from those colonies. It's only that small number of elite that enjoy from colonizing a country, right? It enables them to structure the industry around it, because by having a colony, they can plan for a long periods and expect to have it on cheap. So it by being a competitor and is successful competitor, it can easily to develop such industry. That's why, because it's so complex and expensive, it gives them a little bit of edge over other places. So that only 3 countries can do it on a mass scale. But people don't enjoy anything from the colonies, people themselves. That's the issue.
Well,
Wyatt pointed out. Only
we also need to know, when comparing one country versus the other and their energy prices, the mix is completely different. Because France is overwhelmingly nuclear, whereas another country might have a high wind component or coal or whatever it may be. So when you're trying to compare one versus the other, France should always come in lower, because they've got, I think it's like 75-80% is nuclear, right? Which is way lower than some of these other ones. So I just want to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, the problem is all prices of electricity are calculated in Europe. Unfortunately, they created the unified market, and the French are very mad with it, which is like the most expensive producer of electricity. He dictates the price of electricity. The idea was, in order to make a green energy drive or be possible, they had to make the electricity prices as high as that guy could work. So these guys from these big corporations from the nuclear stations in France were making huge money. The French government was trying to bring it down, but nevertheless, they never really tried that hard to get it. So this is also the truth.
I just about to say that, because it's like France can get the uranium cheap. But the thing is the price of the power, the electricity that the French are paying, I think is still the market rate. So they're just profiting more for these companies, if I'm not wrong. Mike, you were saying something.
They have to
I was saying is that